She is unstable. She is mentally incompetent. She is a drifter with no husband, no career, and she lives in a shoebox apartment. My father, Thomas Hale, was screaming so loudly that the veins in his neck were bulging, his face a terrifying shade of red. He pointed a shaking finger at me across the courtroom. "Look at her, Your Honor. She can't even speak. She needs a conservator to manage her trust fund before she wastes it on whatever unstable people waste money on." I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, calm, checking the time on my watch. 10:14 a.m. Right on schedule. Judge Alvarez stared at him over her glasses, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned forward and asked one quiet question that sliced the room in half. "You really don't know who she is, do you?" At the table beside him, my father's attorney, Mark Ellison, froze mid-scroll, staring at the document the bailiff had just placed in front of him. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might collapse. Before I tell you what the judge revealed that made my father's confidence evaporate, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know who's really here with me. The silence in that wood-paneled courtroom wasn't empty. It was dense, pressurized, the kind of silence that only exists right before something breaks. I didn't look at my father. I didn't give him the satisfaction of watching me react. Instead, I watched dust particles float through a beam of sunlight cutting across the defense table, and my mind drifted back to Christmas Eve 4 months earlier. We were seated at the long dining table in his house, the one in Austin, Texas, the one I was quietly paying the mortgage on. Thomas had laughed when I handed him my new business card. Actually laughed. He tossed it onto the tablecloth like it was trash. "A consultant?" he sneered, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon. "Is that what we're calling unemployed now, Marin? Cute little hobby, sweetheart. But let's be honest, you're playing pretend." I remembered the heat rising in my face that night, the familiar sting of being the disappointment, the failure, the invisible daughter. But sitting in that courtroom, the memory didn't hurt. It fueled me, because while he was mocking my pretend job between bites of roast beef, he had no idea that my firm had just secured a $14 million federal contract auditing a corrupt medical supply chain. He saw a drifter. I saw the managing partner of Atlas Advisory Group, a forensic accounting firm built to follow money that doesn't want to be found. And right now, the money I was following was his. "She's catatonic," Thomas shouted, snapping me back to the present. "Look at her. She hasn't said a word. She's clearly medicated or having some kind of episode. I demand immediate conservatorship immediately." I adjusted my cuff, sealing the cool steel of my watch against my wrist. Let him scream. Let him frame me as the fragile daughter who couldn't keep a husband or a fixed address. That was the strategy. If I spoke now, I'd look defensive, emotional, exactly what he wanted. Silence let him look unstable. Silence let him destroy himself. He pivoted to my living situation next. "She lives in some run-down rental downtown, won't let family visit because she's ashamed, probably filthy." I almost smiled. He was talking about the Calderon. He was right about one thing. I didn't let him visit, but everything else was wrong. I didn't rent there. I owned the building, the entire building, including the office space his firm was leasing on the 3rd floor. I had evicted 2 tenants last quarter for non-payment. My father, a man who prided himself on being sharp, never realized his landlord's signature on those notices was mine. Ellison was sweating now, frantically scrolling through the documents in front of him. I knew exactly what he was reading. It wasn't my grandmother's asset summary, it was mine. I wasn't here for an inheritance. I didn't need one. I earned more in a quarter than my father had in his entire career. I was here because he tried to take my freedom. He tried to weaponize the legal system to erase me. And now, the unstable drifter he'd belittled for 30 years was the one holding the leverage. I met Judge Alvarez's eyes. She gave the smallest nod. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was let him keep talking. "She is clearly unwell," Thomas barked, feeding off his own echo. "Look at her posture, that blank stare. This is what untreated instability looks like." He pounded the podium for emphasis. "I demand immediate conservatorship." I didn't move, didn't blink. Let him perform. Let him unravel. Silence was doing the work for me. Judge Alvarez watched him with a patience that felt surgical. Thomas shifted gears, sensing he needed more. "She lives alone, no husband, no children, no stability, no proof she can manage anything of value." I folded my hands tighter in my lap. Alone wasn't the insult he thought it was. Alone meant uninterrupted, focused, dangerous. My gaze drifted again, not to him, but backward in time, to a Tuesday afternoon 2 years earlier. I remembered the date because it was the same day I closed my first 7-figure audit for a defense subcontractor. 2 police officers knocked on my door with a 5150 involuntary psychiatric hold. The paperwork claimed I was delusional, reckless, burning through my inheritance on imaginary businesses. The signature belonged to a physician I'd never met, a golfing buddy of my father's. The plan was simple: lock me up for 72 hours, file emergency motions, seize control of my trust fund before I could object. He didn't want to protect me, he wanted liquidity. The officers took one look at my apartment, my calm demeanor, and the federal agents visible on my laptop screen mid-call, and they left within minutes. The report was flagged as malicious. I didn't press charges. That would have ended things too quickly. Instead, I decided to become the solution to his problem and the author of his consequences. The next morning, I formed Atlas Advisory Group, a shell company with a neutral name and a Delaware registration. Through Atlas, I approached his bank, quietly, professionally. I offered to purchase his distressed debt. They were thrilled to unload a sinking ship. I bought his loans, his credit lines, every obligation tying him to solvency. Then I injected $650,000 into his firm as a senior secured loan under the guise of private capital. Thomas didn't question it, didn't investigate. He saw the deposit and assumed the universe finally recognized his brilliance. And what did he do with the money? He didn't stabilize payroll, didn't modernize systems. He bought a vintage slate gray Porsche and drove it to Thanksgiving dinner like a trophy. He carved the turkey, raised his glass, and looked straight at me. "Maybe if you applied yourself, Marin, you wouldn't be such a financial embarrassment. At your age, still needing help." I smiled, ate my potatoes. He didn't know the car was already mine. Every mile he drove depreciated an asset he didn't own. Back in the courtroom, Thomas leaned into the podium again, confidence rebuilding. "We're wasting time. My daughter has no income, no assets, and no grasp on reality. This silence is fear. She knows she's nothing without me." I looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't a villain. He was just a bad investment. And today, I was closing the account. His attorney finally found his voice, leaning close, whispering urgently. Thomas brushed him off. "Not now, I'm making my point." "You should listen to your counsel, Mr. Hale," Judge Alvarez said, her tone cold. She lifted a single document. "According to this, the petitioner isn't just your daughter, she's your creditor." Thomas laughed, a wet, dismissive sound. "My creditor? Your Honor, this is exactly what I mean. Delusions of grandeur. Marin can't run a company. She can barely run her own life." His lawyer made a strangled sound, gripping his sleeve. "Thomas, stop. Look at the seal. This is federal. You need to sit down." Thomas yanked his arm free. "I will not sit while my daughter makes a mockery of this court." He turned back to the judge, pointing at me. "Look at her clothes. Discount suit, scuffed shoes. Does that look like success to you?" I glanced down. The scuffs came from climbing through a warehouse window to verify inventory. I didn't replace them because I didn't care. Unlike him, I didn't wear my worth. She lives at the Calderon, he snapped, delivering what he thought was the final blow. That crumbling brick building downtown, a studio, probably rats in the walls. And you want me to believe she owns Atlas? I kept my face neutral. He was right about the rats. When I bought it, I fixed that, renovated, took the top floor. Unit 3C was just a mail drop. He thought I rented. He didn't know he was insulting his own landlord. This is a waste of taxpayer money, Thomas shouted. She's unstable, alone, no legacy, just a sad girl telling stories. Sign the order. He stood there, chest heaving, convinced he'd won. Judge Alvarez slowly removed her glasses. Boredom replaced patience. Mr. Hale, she said quietly, you have 10 seconds to sit down and stop speaking, or I will hold you in contempt so fast you won't understand what happened. His mouth opened. His attorney forced him into his chair. Good, the judge said. Now that we've heard your opinion, let's review the facts. Because according to this deed, the crumbling brick building you just insulted, Judge Alvarez said, sliding a single page across the polished wood, she doesn't just live there. The paper stopped inches from my father's trembling hand. The Calderon. Unit 3C is indeed a mail drop. You were correct about that. But Miss Hale doesn't rent it. She owns the entire property, including the commercial suites on the 3rd floor, the suites your firm currently occupies. Thomas stared at the page, then at me, then back at the judge. His mind stalled. That's impossible. My landlord is a corporate entity. I pay rent to Atlas Real Estate. I've never written her a check. Atlas, the judge repeated, opening another folder. Atlas Real Estate. Atlas Capital. Atlas Advisory Group. According to your disclosures, Atlas Advisory is your firm's primary lender. In fact, the only reason your firm is solvent. They injected $650,000 2 years ago. Is that accurate? Thomas straightened, finding familiar ground. Yes, Atlas is a private capital backer. They believed in my firm, recognized my talent, saved us. He sneered at me, unlike my daughter, who wouldn't recognize an investment if it tripped her. I watched him brag about the rope. Fascinating, the judge said, turning the folder, because the sole incorporator, CEO, and signatory of Atlas Advisory Group is Marin Hale. The room emptied of air. Thomas stared at the signature. Mine, the same one I'd used on birthday cards he never opened, the same one on the lease renewal he signed without reading. No, he whispered, then louder. No, this is fraud. He turned to his attorney. Tell her. This is illegal. She's not a lawyer. Non-lawyers can't own firms. ABA Rule 5.4. He turned back to me, triumphant. You broke the rules. You're finished. Dismiss this. She's not my creditor. She's a fraud. I leaned forward and spoke for the first time. You're right, Thomas. I can't own your firm. I stood. But you didn't read the contract. I walked toward him, heels steady on hardwood. His attorney shrank back. I didn't buy equity, I said calmly. I bought your debt. I tossed the loan file onto the table. 2 years ago, you were insolvent. 3 banks rejected you. You were commingling client funds to pay personal expenses. That was temporary, he snapped. Cash flow. It wasn't equity, I said. It was insolvency. Atlas purchased your loans, your credit lines, and the lien on your equipment, then extended $650,000 as a senior secured loan. His attorney flinched. I don't own your firm. I own the collateral. Every desk, every laptop, every file. Default triggers seizure. I pointed to the clause. Default on character. Public disparagement of the guarantor accelerates the loan. You called me incompetent on record. You defaulted. I checked my watch. The balance is due now. His face drained. I don't have that money. I know. You have $11,000 in the bank and a maxed card. I turned to the judge. I'm calling the loan. I request enforcement. His attorney stood. If you seize assets, the firm collapses. I accept your resignation, I said. Thomas erupted, then grabbed his phone. Chapter 7. Automatic stay. You get nothing. Bankruptcy protects companies, not guarantors, I said, sliding the final page forward. You signed personally, Cross-collateralized. When the firm fails, the debt transfers to you. Silence. You didn't bankrupt the firm. You bankrupted yourself. I now have claims on your house, the lake cabin, the Porsche, your pension, even your club membership. The gavel fell. Hearing dismissed with prejudice. Asset seizure granted. 24 hours to vacate. Commercial eviction effective immediately. His attorney packed up and left without a word. Thomas sat small and hollow, staring at what remained. I walked out without looking back. That night, I watched a locksmith change the office locks. The firm's nameplate dropped into a box. I didn't profit. I didn't need to. The money was the price of my freedom. At home, I deleted his contact. Not blocked, deleted. Just silence. Sometimes you don't have to destroy a toxic family. You just have to stop funding it. Most people scroll past stories like this. The ones who subscribe are the ones trying to change something inside themselves. If this made you stop scrolling, subscribe to get more stories like this every day, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.